All right, and welcome into the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show. Today we preview the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine from a fantasy football perspective. I'm your host, Seth Woolcock, and I'm once again joined by a man who is setting the internet ablaze lately with his takes on this rookie class, the sole member of the Tyler Shough fan club, Derek Brown, aka D-Bro. What's going on, pal? How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I don't know if you've been out there on the timeline. I'm not alone in my Tyler Shough love. I got to throw that out there. It's he's been, not to foreshadow too much, we're going to discuss him on today's show, but he's been making the rounds, so I'm not as crazy as it might seem, Seth.
You were like the first chair, like if you ever gone into one of those groups, like you were the first chair in the circle. You were sitting there, hi, my name's Derek. I am a Tyler Shough fan. And now you've slowly been joined. People are making the rounds. The hot dogs, the donuts, it's all coming in. So you are not alone now, but you were a few weeks ago, I feel like.
My name is Derek Brown. It's been 8 days since I tweeted about Tyler Shough. Yeah, no, dude. I mean, like, we'll talk about it, but the steam is kind of building, man.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Ray thought I was crazy. You thought I was crazy. I might still be crazy. I'll own this, but I might not be alone, Seth.
Absolutely. We'll discuss that later. Today's program looks like this. We'll preview the 2025 NFL Combine and break down how to gauge this event from an evaluation standpoint. Plus, D-Bro will unveil his top 10 players with the most to prove. And before we jump in, I just want to quickly shout out everyone who's tuning in on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel or the audio feed. Thank you so much for riding alongside with us. Do us a quick favor, please like this video if you enjoy this type of content. Also, subscribe to the channel if you are new. It's the easiest way to support us and the work we're doing here at Fantasy Pros. Now, let's go ahead. Let's jump in and talk about the event itself and what to watch for. Of course, the NFL Scouting Combine is the next step of the road to the NFL Draft, where 329 of the top prospects have been invited to attend. The event will get underway from Lucas Oil Stadium on February 24th, although televised on-field workouts are as follows: defensive line and linebackers on Thursday, March 27th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. DBs and tight ends on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, the big day, Saturday, March 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then the offensive linemen will round us out on Sunday, March 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you're curious, the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes have the most invited players with 15. We also have Texas and Georgia with 14 each. D-Bro, what are your general feelings about the Combine, and how big of a part of the process is it for you?
Well, I'm going to steal a line from one of our previous guests, Brett Whitefield, because I feel like this is really a fantastic way to put it. He mentioned this around Senior Bowl, and I want to mention this around the Combine. It's another addition to the story. It allows players to add to the narrative, crush narratives, answer some questions. It's just a fantastic week, man. And I think, like, you know, we all talk about all the things that we could see and with on-field stuff and the testing, and we're going to get into all that here. But also a big part of this process and a big part of this week are the things that we don't see, Seth. The team interviews, the ortho exams, the medical exams, guys getting checked out and stuff, and what that's going to do for their NFL draft stock. You know, how well are they going to interview? Like, you know, we're not getting looks behind the scene for all these guys, like, you know, with Hard Knocks and things that come out, and we might get it later. But this is big as far as, like, how are these guys going to interview on the whiteboard, all these parts or pieces, what that's going to do to their NFL draft stock. So I love this week. I feel like, and we're going to kind of get into the testing metrics and stuff, you see a lot of double counting throughout this process, Seth, about like, oh, wow, this player is super athletic. Like, you didn't already know that before you went to the Combine.
Yeah.
But in this process, we find out about a lot of players. But the thing I want to also highlight before we kind of get into the different testing metrics is, again, don't double count. If you could see a guy on film was super fast, when he goes out there and he runs a freaking 4.3, that shouldn't be bumping him up your board. Shouldn't matter. When a guy goes out there and he throws the ball a country mile and you saw that on film, that shouldn't bump him up your board any further than he already was.
And I think there is such a fine line between reacting and overreacting. I can remember a few years ago when Anthony Richardson, he goes out and has potentially the best combine we've ever seen for a quarterback prospect, highest RAS score ever. And I just fell in love with him at that moment. I think that was an overreaction. And then I think back to like the 2022 class. We had guys like Treylon Burks at the wide receiver position. And after the combine, I was like, okay, I'm kind of out on this guy. I think I was already out on that. And I did double count a little bit, which kind of saved me. But then I was also like, well, I loved what I saw from Christian Watson at the Senior Bowl and on tape. So I'm going to push all my chips in after he has a crazy, day weighing in with his height and also just with what he ran for the 42. So I think that's a very good thing to keep in mind, Derek, that we don't want to be overreacting or underreacting to this as well. There's a fine line there.
There definitely is, dude. And people just got to stay even keeled. The process is the process. The film tells all, and so do the metrics.
Absolutely. The 40-yard dash obviously matters for wide receivers and running backs, and I feel like it's held in an even higher regard now that you can bet on it. One of my favorite markets to gamble on. But is it overrated, do you think? Like, are these agility drills like the 3-cone and the shuttle actually better predictors of NFL success?
So I think for the 40 specifically, I think it's hitting thresholds. It's hitting the marks. Like, I don't want, if you're a wide receiver, I don't want there to be the coffin nail for you. Like, I don't want you to go out and run a 4.7 for running backs. I don't want you to go out and run like a 4.6. Like, those are the things that when I look at the 40 specifically, don't do something that is going to wipe you off of my board. And for me, like with wide receivers, be in the 4.5, 4.6 range at least. Or if you're slower, hey, guess what? If your agent tells you don't run. Yeah. But as far as running back, same thing. Like, don't run a freaking like in the high 4.6s and things like that. For tight ends, I think that this is looking at like the tight ends and the 40 specifically, and we can kind of we'll parse through all of this. I feel like tight end and all of these different metrics is the most correlative to the high end upside. You're not going to see, if you go through the laundry list of tight ends and the high-end producers for fantasy and in the NFL circles, you're not going to see a lot of guys that aren't uber ridiculous athletes. That if they're a top tight end, like the elite of elites, they're super ridiculous like they're aliens as far as athleticism. And so specifically for the tight end position, if you don't at least run a 4.7 in your 40, you're off my board for fantasy purposes. You can count the number of guys that have run a 4.8 or higher on one hand that have ever put up fantasy productive seasons, especially even like consecutive ones. It's basically Isaiah Likely, Kyle Rudolph, and it's like end of list. And that's it. So for me, a lot of the testing metrics, especially the 40, I want you to just hit the thresholds, like hit a ground rule double, like prove that you're athletic enough. Now, when we kind of parse through some of the finer points of it, do I care about your shorter agility and does that help? Yes, absolutely. Like for running backs particularly, one of the best correlative things as far as tackle breaking that you can find is not necessarily the 40, but a player's 10-yard split. So when we get into the conversations and the minutia of, okay, well, this running back's small and short and he's slow. Well, some of these guys, if you go back to like some of their 10-yard splits and things like that, like the Kyron Williams of the world, his 10-yard split wasn't bad, but his 40 time wasn't great either. So you look at his 40 time and you're like, oh dear Lord, like that's horrible. Like Kyron Williams goes out, he runs a 40 that is just not great for his size. Like talking about a back that's sub 200, he goes out and he runs that 4.65. That's not great, but you also look at the 10-yard splits for some of these guys. Like Kyron Williams, his 10-yard split wasn't great, but take a guy like Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving's 10-yard split, when you go look at his 40 time and stuff like that, his 10-yard split wasn't bad at all. So looking at not only just these raw numbers, but looking at the 10-yard split specifically for running backs, and going back to Bucky Irving, his 40 time for his size was only 53rd percentile. But his 10-yard split was in the 68th percentile. So not as bad as maybe the 40 time made us think.
Yeah, and I know with Bucky Irving specifically, he was pretty high up in the favorites list to potentially go out and run the fastest 40. So I know when he had a little bit slower 40, kind of knocked himself down a lot of people's fantasy football draft boards. He slid into the back half of Dynasty rookie drafts. So I think, having that 10-yard split in your mindset is something very important. So I appreciate that. How important are the metrics like hand size, height, and weight, Derek? Like, we've seen wide receivers lately buck the narrative that height and weight really matters for that position. But quarterback hand size, it has been such a huge discussion this decade with the likes of Joe Burrow having small hands. Kenny Pickett had under 9-inch size hands. So how does this all kind of weigh into the equation for you?
I want you to at least hit the 9-inch mark as far as with hand size. Now, looking at this, that's where Burrow came in. And that's where a lot of other guys, like if you look at that list of guys with smaller hands, please at least have 9-inch hands. Like we could talk about Burrow, there's Ryan Tannehill, there's a few other guys that have gone on and had productive, if not really, really freaking Jared Goff.
Yep.
Really freaking good careers with smaller hands, but not small enough hands to where it is incredibly concerning. Like if you get below 9 inches, then we might have a problem when we're talking about it, because the list of guys since 1999 with sub 9-inch hands, it's not pretty, Seth. Like we're talking about, we're living in the range of Kenny Pickett, Skylar Thompson, Brandon Allen, Kyle Shermer, like Jake Fromm. Like that's the range we're living in with sub 9-inch hands. So it's particularly for hand size, and I do think it matters. Just have 9 inches. 9-inch hands and above, and we are good. Now, as far as the height discussion, I don't really care about the height discussion for wide receivers. I think it's somewhat a thing for tight ends. Like, we want you, like, probably in that close to 6'4" and above range, just to kind of fit the model for prototypical tight ends. Because if you're smaller than that, you have to be an even more ridiculous athlete.
Right.
You're going to have to maybe play a hyper-specific role, maybe not going to play much inline and stuff like that, and maybe you're not an every down player. So for tight ends, it goes back to the athleticism, and on the height stuff, it's really like, we really like 6'4" and above. Wide receivers, I don't really care about how tall you are specifically. Like 5'9" and above, we're good. Really, for wide receivers, it comes down to weight for me. Not just talking about testing and things like that, but like with the weight, it's like we've seen guys in the last few years, Seth, come in at 165 and be very productive. Tank Dell, I'm talking about you. Guys that are lower than that, that's where I'm like, dude, I don't know about it. Like Tez Johnson coming in, and we're not talking about him on this episode, but he's the guy that comes to mind for me. Like he's 155 freaking pounds.
Yeah.
That's a problem. If he hits, he's going to be a massive, massive outlier. Tutu Atwell's of the world. Like players like that where it's like, okay, we've seen players at 165 succeed. Getting lower than that, it's pretty much a coffin nail. Now, going back to the height stuff for quarterbacks, I think that matters, dude. And we've talked about, like, in previous years about, okay, Kyler Murray being shorter. We talk about Dylan Gabriel from this class, other guys from previous, Bryce Young. That matters because if you look at just, I mean, and this is a common sense thing. And in previous years, the deeper I've gotten into prospects, I didn't think that height mattered as much as I do now for quarterbacks, but it absolutely does matter, Seth. Like when you look at shorter quarterbacks, it is a real thing of shorter quarterbacks not being able to see over the offensive line and access the middle of the field.
They're giants.
I mean, are there ways that you can scheme around that as far as like the way Sean Payton did with Drew Brees and spacing the offensive line and creating passing lanes and stuff? Using the screen game. Can you do that? Yes. Is that a replicable thing that you could do for every short quarterback and it fits their skill sets? No. So like the shorter quarterbacks, it is a reality that a lot of these guys are not going to access the middle of the field. Is that going to change the projection, the system that you wanted this guy to go to, what that looks like in the NFL? The shortcomings, not to pun there, but the shortcomings of their game by not utilizing the middle of the field. Like Russell Wilson still doesn't know what the middle of the field looks like.
Oh,
has never seen it. Ain't gonna see it. So those things all come into play. So for quarterbacks, It's hand size, it's height. The rest of it, we could talk about archetypes of quarterbacks and mobile and non-mobile and all that kind of stuff. But those are the real big things that I care about for every different position.
Is there anything specifically for running backs you're looking in the height and weight metric? Because this is something that's always a discussion online every single year and I feel like we've seen every type of body work at the running back position. So it's always one that's really tough for me to say, hey, I think this height and weight is preferred at that position.
So I used to be very astringent about, I want you to be 200 pounds or over. Like, my favorite build of a running back is that 5'8" to 5'10", like 200 to 215-ish range, like the short, squatty kind of guys that can create. They're jitterbugs, they're twitchy. But really, dude, this iteration of the NFL in the last few years has kind of also shown us that the entire, like, paradigm of we need you to be 200 pounds or 210 to really give these guys a substantial workload in the NFL. We've seen that trend kind of bucked, Seth. Like, we could talk about Kyron Williams. We could talk about Bucky Irving. We could also talk about Austin Eckler because he wasn't over that threshold when he entered the NFL.
FCS guy too, yeah.
Exactly. So, like, there's a lot of different guys that have come out of the woodwork in the last few years where we can't just say with a blanket statement for running backs anymore, okay, you need to be over 200 pounds. Okay, you need to be over 210. Like, that's not a reality as far as, like, can a guy fall into a role or earn a role being sub 200 pounds where he can get a crap ton of volume? We're seeing that more and more in the NFL. So while I used to be like, well, he's sub 200 pounds or sub 210, like, oh, well, he's not going to get a lot of work in the NFL, so I need to bump him down. The other guy that I'll mention in the same breath, we've seen Jahmyr Gibbs came into the NFL, 199. So that trend of needing to be 200 or 210 pounds to get, like, the workload that we want for fantasy or be a workhorse back in the NFL, that narrative is quickly dying. So no. Do I care if you're 170 pounds? Sure. Do I care if you're probably 180 pounds? Sure. But if you're somewhere in that mid to high 180, 190-ish range, it's becoming less and less of a factor.
Okay, so more just kind of looking for outliers, and if there is anything that's sub 180, maybe it's then concerning. And yeah, I can remember back there's been so many times, like Tariq Cohen was a guy that I know a lot of people had issues with. Achane when he was coming up, people were
Achane, another good one.
Yeah, so I always just love seeing too, like, how big of liars are these universities, because they have people listed at some crazy height and weight sometimes when it comes back. So I always like Michigan State is one that, like, I do not trust Michigan State's height and weight because every time I feel like we come to the combine, we're like, all right, well, they're liars. Sparty's lying once again. So it's just something I kind of find amusing, especially, when kind of applying it back to the college landscape as well. Before we transition into our top 10 prospects who have the most to prove, if you want a chance to win a signed Aaron Jones Minnesota Vikings jersey for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either A, download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, B, leave a review for this podcast right here, or C, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you're going to receive, and we'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe, ring the bell for notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and get into the top 10 prospects who have the most to prove at the 2025 NFL Combine. And number 10, the first player up, it's a guy we've discussed on our last episode of the show with our guy Ray GQ, Miami quarterback Cam Ward. After leading the country in passing touchdowns and bringing Miami back to national relevancy, the Washington State transfer is the most very debated quarterback prospect, I would say. QB1, QB2 on most people's boards. Derek, you have him all the way down at quarterback 3. What do you think Ward can prove to you and the rest of NFL scouts in Indianapolis?
One, he's not going to move in my ranks based off of what he does at the combine. It's not going to change. It's not going to change what I think about Cam Ward. The big reason I think that we need to be watching Ward and what I think matters about Ward in this venue is, and one of the questions he has to answer, which version of Cam Ward do we get this week, Seth? Because if you just watch Cam Ward's tape, there are highlight moments, high-level moments, highlight reel stuff where you're like, Cam Ward could be a top 5 quarterback, top 7 quarterback in the NFL if everything hits. Now, the flip side of that is there are also some bipolar moments where you're like, oh, geez, like, the accuracy's not good. Dude has a howitzer, but come on, like, take your foot off the gas for a second, man. Like this is a problem. Like, you don't need to be firing fastballs like 90 miles an hour for freaking 5-yard out routes. So my big thing for Cam Ward is in this venue, and specifically, I don't really care so much about the testing stuff. What I care about is the throwing drills, because he's going to be working with wide receivers he doesn't have a rapport with, being on the same page with those guys, as well as which version of Cam Ward do we see in Indianapolis? Is it the Cam Ward that's dialing and he's lacing second-level throws? Is it the Cam Ward that the touch is a bit off? And with guys that he's not throwing to, doesn't have that type of rapport with, is he going to have a rough time? Because we've also seen guys that are super talented, Seth, go to Indy, and when we get into those drills and they're throwing, the timing is off and it doesn't look great. So Cam Ward, that could be the difference between Cam Ward being QB1 in this class for a lot of people, or QB2 in this class for a lot of people, or some teams. Now, for me, that's not changing where I'm ranking Cam Ward. But this is a big week, and I think Cam Ward needs to go to Indy and have the best version of himself on display.
Next up is someone I don't think the overall community has caught on to quite yet. It's Louisville quarterback Tyler Shough. He's 25 years old. He's played 7 seasons of collegiate ball, making stops in Oregon and Texas Tech before eventually getting his chance to shine for the Cardinals under head coach Jeff Brom. He had 23 passing touchdowns, nearly 3,200 yards, and 6 interceptions, led the Ville to a 9-4 season in the ACC. D-Bro, I know I gave you, some dirty looks last time, and also called you out at the beginning of this show.
You weren't alone.
Because you have him as an eye-popping quarterback 4 in this class, and I'm sure you also saw that Louis Riddick of ESPN called him as potential steal of the draft. What do you think Shough can prove to the rest of the NFL scouting community in Lucas Oil? Could he be the next Brock Purdy maybe when it's all said and done?
I did not know Louis Riddick was high on him. I did see some buzz out there on the social media streets about Tyler Shough this week. The big
it
thing
wasn't
about
your
Tyler
burner.
Shough,
It wasn't your burner.
No. My burner was active retweeting other things.
Okay.
No. Vegas or not Vegas related things. But anyway, I digress. With Shough, man, like, I think this is a huge week, and I think that Shough can put himself in that QB4 conversation. And I think when you're looking at where can he go in the NFL draft, like right now, if you're on an NFL mock draft database, Tyler Shough is sitting with an EDP, expected draft position, of 176. He's QB 11. He's behind Kyle McCord, Riley Leonard, and Curtis Rourke. I think that is woefully disrespectful to his talent and what he could do in the NFL. And I think we're already seeing a lot of the analysts kind of come around. We talked about this on the previous episode, but I like his skill set. I like his makeup. The first thing that everybody throws out there about the conversation with starting with Tyler Shough is his age. I don't care that he's 25. I do not care. Because tell me if you've heard this narrative recently, Seth. Oh, wow, all these quarterbacks come into the NFL, like a Brock Purdy, like a lot of other quarterbacks, like Bo Nix. And people are talking about, well, now maybe we should be valuing starting experience and collegiate starts, and he's seen it all. And the resiliency from program to program and still coming through the muck and being that guy. So in that same breath, a lot of different places will talk about that starting experience, and all those starts and all that time means something, right? But in the next conversation, people want to be like, with their bad jokes, and be like, hey, he's 25, he's old, he's been in college forever. I've seen people tweeting out like, well, Trevor Lawrence is younger than Tyler Shough. Well, yeah, who cares, dude? Who cares? Justin Herbert's in the NFL. He was backing up Justin Herbert. Like, who cares, man? This is not a running back. This is not a wide receiver we're talking about. This is not another skill player. This is a freaking quarterback. And if they're good, they play into their mid-30s, their late 30s. I'm not telling you that Tyler Shough has that type of career, but what I'm saying is 25 years old is not a dinosaur or ancient for the quarterback position. This kid can play, man. Like, if you watch his film, he makes multiple awesome throws with multiple arm angles and off-platform and off-script stuff. So I think all the injuries, I'm not worried about that because a lot of these are isolated things. It's not like he tore his knee, he's torn up his shoulder multiple times. All that he broke his collarbone twice, dude. Like, what stock or worries are we putting about that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not worried about the medicals, but I think that he has got a lot to prove, though. This is a fantastic opportunity for Tyler Shough to rise from the ashes of the QB 10, QB 11, round 5, round 6 expected draft position right now. Put himself into that late day 2, that round 3, round 4 conversation. Put himself into that QB4 conversation. Because for me, the top 3 guys are cemented, set, forget. The conversation for these quarterback rankings for me starts at QB4. I think it is an open competition between Tyler Shough and Will Howard. And if Shough comes away with a strong showing at Indy, I think he could be rising up, not so much rising up boards, but catching some steam and people putting a little bit more respect on his name. And after Indy, he might be the locked-in QB4 of this class.
The interesting thing about Shough, too, is I really liked how he did perform against high-level talent. Like, goes in, he beats Clemson this year, also played really good against Notre Dame, gave them a scare. Like, those are 2 of the better defenses he faced and rose to the occasion. So hopefully he can rise to the occasion once again at the Combine next week. Next up is perhaps the most interesting RB prospect in the 2025 class, Arizona State running back Cam Skattebo. This is a guy who transferred to Arizona State from Sacramento State after 2 seasons out there. He lost a bunch of weight coming into this season, broke out to the tune of over 1,500 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns. Also a dual threat running back as well that is very, very attractive for fantasy purposes. 37 receptions for the Sun Devils, 500 plus receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. 5th in the Heisman voting and led Arizona State to a college football playoff berth and a Big 12 title win as well in the first year that they were in the conference when they were projected to finish dead last. So what do you want to see from Skattebo this week? Is it the 40 time? Because he certainly isn't the fastest car in the garage, D-bro.
That's fair. And I just want him to not be the golf cart with a dead battery. That's all I want. I want Cam Skattebo to be just hit the benchmarks, man. Running the 4.5s. Have decent short area agility. If he can do that, heck, if he can go out and surprise people, he's going to help himself. Because we've all talked about this, and we're going to talk about this on future episodes, Seth. But, like, this is a very, very deep tight end class. This is a very, very deep running back class.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the small, like, the minutia of the little, like, parsing of testing and analytics, and some of this is team fit and scheme fit and things like that. Skattebo needs to go out there and just prove that he has enough athleticism to be whatever any team wants him to be, and he's not Elijah Holyfield. Now, I don't think he's going to go out there and run a freaking 4.7, but is he going to go out there and test like freaking David Montgomery, or is he going to go out there and be better than that? That could be the difference between Skattebo going round 3, maybe round 4.
Yeah.
So for me, this is a big week for him. And the other thing about it is, does he just opt out of some of these testing things? Because we see some guys that go in there, they'll do certain things, but then not do other things. So like, does he do the short area agility and then not run the 40 or run the 40 at his pro day or things like that? I wouldn't hate if he did that as well, because I think this is also a venue where guys need to make business decisions. Like if your agent is telling you, or you're being out there running and you know you're not going to go run a 4.5, don't run the freaking 40, dude.
Like Audric Estime last year running a 4.7.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just don't tank your stock unnecessarily. Wait until your pro day. Get yourself in a better situation. Like, fine, do that. So for Skattebo, it's like, for me, it's like, test good enough. I'm not expecting you to test great. Just hit the benchmarks, man. Hit a ground rule double. That's all I want here.
And I think he like literally checks all the other boxes if his athleticism does show up. Like This is a guy, leader of his team, seemed like a great overall guy to have in the locker room. And another thing I liked about him is, like, I'm not huge on all the time Big 12 running backs, but like the only SEC defenses he faced this past year, Mississippi State, 297 total yards. I know the Bulldogs aren't necessarily the best SEC team, but also Texas in that Peach Bowl game, man. Like, this guy had over 240 combined yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown, and proved he can do it against high-level competition. Almost took Arizona State to the Final Four of the CFP. So I love what we've seen from him. Hopefully he can continue to make a statement in Indianapolis next week.
Yep, agreed.
At number 7, you have Utah State wide receiver Jalen Royals. We've discussed Royals at length on this program as one of the best wide receivers in this class to come out of a G5 conference. First team All-Mountain West in 2023, second team in 2024. You had him as one of your winners leaving the Senior Bowl because he showed you a lot, despite not being at 100% with what we believe to be some type of soft tissue issue. Do you think if he comes into the combine fully healthy, he can prove a lot of people that his athleticism is there?
I do, and I want that for Jalen Royals. Like, right now, looking at his expected draft position, he's sitting at 66. So he's right there on the cusp of maybe being a second round or a third round pick. So coming from the small school, okay, he proved in Mobile that he can win with his route running. Now we need to show, like, him to go out there and show some of the testing stuff. And again, this comes out to, like, can he build steam and help his draft stock in that realm, especially because this is also a guy, not only are we talking about coming off the soft tissue stuff, Seth, he's also coming off a season-ending foot injury. So proving not only with the medicals, but, you know, the medical stuff that we're not going to know about, but also going out there and testing and proving, if you test well, you're also proving that I am healthy, I am over, you know, being dinged up in Mobile and coming off the foot injury, and I'm ready to go, man. So, like, for Royals, I want him to go out there and wow some people, build the steam, help his draft stock, maybe push himself from a third-round pick to maybe a late second-round pick. I don't know if he can get there, but he can help his case in an outing, like with a really strong outing like that.
And so important for these G5 players, I think, to have a great outing in Indianapolis because they just don't draw as much national attention. It's just the truth. You know, I think people still respect all the G5 conferences, especially the Mountain West with what Boise State did this past year, but it's always a conversation. And speaking of a G5 player, at number 6, we have Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr., another one of your Senior Bowl winners, consensus All-American, MAC Offensive Player of the Year, led the MAC and the country in receptions, 117, also led the country in receiving yards with over 1,550 yards. What can Harold Fannin Jr. do to move up yours or others' NFL draft board here, D-Bro?
So my worries about Fannin going against better competition, now he answered a lot of my questions as far as from a route running standpoint and the ability to get open versus better competition. But the thing for Fannin, again, going back to the size for the tight end position, he's 6'3", 238. He's kind of on the cusp of, can he be that every down guy? Can he play in line? We didn't see him do that a ton in college. Like, we're talking about a guy that was more of a glorified wide receiver, 52.6% of his snaps in his collegiate career, either in the slot or out wide. So for me with Fannin Jr., I just don't want him to become or be Jaheim Bell. I don't want that to be the case.
I love Jaheim Bell.
A lot of people did. I was worried about him because, like, at the size, if you don't test amazing and stuff like that, are you going to get pigeonholed by NFL scouts and teams as a tweener? Are you going to be pegged as this Mike Gesicki type of role? And it's like, we've seen Gesicki struggle to find his footing in the NFL. He's found it in a few different spots. Yeah. Is Fannin going to test well enough? Like, I have questions. Like, I think his short area agility is good enough. My question is, what is he going to run the 40? Is it going to be fast enough? And is he going to do the other parts? Like, and is that going to make the difference between Harold Fannin being a round 3 pick in the NFL draft? Or does he tumble to round 4, round 5? I think the range of outcomes can be, or the range of his possible draft position could be massively affected by what he does in Indy and adding or detracting from his story.
I love it, man. Yeah, I'm rooting for you, Harold Fannin Jr., big
Same.
action fan over here. So let's see it in Indianapolis. And by now, most of you have probably already heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it yet? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract, and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. And if you think it sounds complicated, it's really not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard Dynasty League. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? Well, you can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. D-Bros number 5 prospect is someone that I am a big fan of, TCU wide receiver Savion Williams. He's on Bruce Feldman's freak list, and rightfully so. The dude is a dual threat player who finished with 50 receptions, over 600 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns this past year. Also rushed for another 322 yards and 6 touchdowns coming on 51 carries. Sonny Dykes like to use this guy everywhere, out wide, in the slot, in the backfield, even as a Wildcat quarterback at times. What do you hope to learn from him at the Combine, D-Bro?
He needs to go out and just test like a mutant, dude. We know.
Yeah.
We all know the narratives around Savion Williams, and that's going to be, okay, you're going to hear the names of Cordell Patterson evoked a lot with him. Laviska Shenault. You're going to hear these names evoked a lot in the conversations with Savion Williams. He needs to go out and do exactly what everybody thinks he's going to do and what I think he's going to do, and he needs to test like an absolute mutant. Because if he doesn't, all the worries about, okay, what kind of role can he play? Is he a true wide receiver? The refined other parts of his game and his draft stock could take a hit. Because when you have questions about what kind of role can this guy fill, can he be a true every down wide receiver because he's played this Swiss Army knife role in college, those questions don't go away and they don't get any better as far as helping yourself or hurting yourself as far as your draft stock if you don't test like just a total immortal. So Savion Williams, I think he's going to do that. And to give context to that, like Feldman Freak Lister, this dude has had a previously supposedly gone out and had a 10-6 broad jump, 40-inch vertical. He squatted 600 pounds, benched over 350, been clocked over 22.5 miles an hour. So I think he's going to go out and break a lot of stopwatches and as far as how he's going to jump and all that kind of stuff. But he needs to do it to help himself and really for NFL teams to get fired up about drafting him.
Yeah, I love Williams. Hopefully he can test great in Indy. And speaking of mutants, who's your favorite X-Men, D-Bro? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh, dude, that's a really good question. It's a combo.
Okay.
It's either, if I'm not going to go with Wolverine, which has been one of my favorites, the easy answer for me, dude, is Gambit. Gambit's always been one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
Now, whether we want to go with my Louisiana heritage and things like that, but I feel like also, like, you know, the cat's out of the bag with all of that kind of stuff. Like, Channing Tatum did a fantastic job in Deadpool and Wolverine. I want to see a standalone movie for him. Let's make it happen.
Let's go. I'm a Nightcrawler guy. That's probably my guy.
Baby, I love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
You were talking about Savion Williams. Like, he kind of reminds me of Nightcrawler, the way he's running all over the field. So, another prospect with a lot to prove in Indy, according to D-Bro, is most evaluators wide receiver 1 of this class, Arizona Wildcat wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. He's a 2024 consensus All-American. Also is coming off back-to-back seasons of 80-plus receptions, 1,300 yards, was top 5 in the nations in receiving yards both of the past few years. 6'5", 212 pounds, has one of the nastiest catch radiuses you'll see from a collegiate wide receiver. D-Bro, what do you think Tet can do to prove that he is, in fact, the wide receiver 1 of this class? Because he's coming out of a school in Arizona has not performed great, played in the Pac-12 before flipping to the Big 12 this year, so not the best competition he always faced out there.
Do the things that you're going to do well at the combine. So the testing metrics, if you're going to perform at least baseline or really freaking good, do those, Tet. Do those so you can cement yourself. And I'm not saying do everything, because I think there's certain things, like if you go and check out some of the articles and things like that, is going back to the freak list by Feldman. Tet's even like talked about it, like, look, I got really good as far as like above the rim skills. My vert is not amazing. And so for me, I'm like, Tet, okay, don't do the vert, dude. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because guess what? If you can do it on the field, that's all we care about. Don't hurt your stock in any way. If you go out there and you can smash the 40, you can smash the short area stuff, do it. My big thing for Tet this week, or excuse me, at the week of the combine, is go out and do the things that you can do well. If that is don't test or test, do whatever you can to sit here and cement yourself as the clear wide receiver 1 super alpha stud of this class that we all think and hope that you can be and you will be. Don't do anything to hurt yourself. If that is, I'm going to pull the Marvin Harrison Jr., I ain't testing, I'm not doing a dang thing, and I'm just going to go out there and run routes with a quarterback, do that, dude. But don't do anything to hurt yourself. And the things that you can ball out and you can show out, do those. But if it ain't none of that, then don't.
Yeah, I don't need any more people pushing Luther Burden as their wide receiver 1 on me.
No,
So I hope Tet does have a great week out there. The number 3 prospect with the most approved at the combine for Debro is Delaware running back Marcus Yarns. He was one of our biggest 10 winners coming out of the Senior Bowl, especially coming from an FCS program in Delaware, which will now move to Conference USA in 2025. Debro, is this just a situation of a potential big-time player coming from a small school that needs to kind of buck that FCS label and narrative that surrounds him?
I think, and we're the next guy we're going to get into on this list, I think you could lump both these guys together, but talking about Yarns first, I think in a deep, again, we're going back to what are the deep parts of this class for skill players? It's running back and it's tight end. So the guys that we're talking about here, these are guys that need to separate themselves. Now, whether that's coming from small schools or just trying to rise up out of the fog and say, I'm better than the rest of this tier of running backs or the rest of these guys that are similar archetype. Like, hey, I'm Marcus Yarns. I'm freaking awesome. I can, so apparently he is also previously hit a top speed of 22.9 miles per hour. He's previously supposedly had a vert of 38.5 inches. Not only am I a sub 200 back, and we go back to disproving or bucking those narratives of needing to be 200 pounds, 210, but also working against coming from a small school, I can rise above the rest of the tier of these guys or separate myself from a deep class to where I'm not a round 6 guy. I'm a round 4 guy. I'm not a round 5 guy. I'm going at the top of round 4. I can get a team to fall in love with me. That is what Marcus Yarns should be hoping for this week. I'm going to go out there and ball out in all the receiving drills, look fluid, test awesome, and really get the locomotive going for the NFL draft.
Yeah, I always have a soft spot for the FCS players, and like we can't forget that like there are Hall of Famers like Walter Payton who've played at FCS schools at the running back position. He played at Jackson State for a couple years. Brian Westbrook in the 2000s, he came out of Villanova, played for his hometown in Philly, and then David Johnson just a few years ago, Northern Iowa type of guy. So there are these types of players. It is an uphill climb, but hopefully you can start to put the pieces together at the combine. And before we give you our last 2 players, please, just a quick reminder to join our Fantasy Pros Discord community. You can chat with other fans and get access to exclusive AMAs that wind up on our podcast feed. Here's our current schedule. Worm and Fitz, they are live on the first Tuesday of each month at 5 Eastern. And then Fitz and Boggs are back to discuss Dynasty at 5 Eastern on the third Tuesday of each month. So come get your questions answered and be on the show at fantasypros.com/chat. Another under-the-radar running back with something to prove at the combine is Virginia Tech's Bhayshul Tuten. There was a ton of hype surrounding Kyron Jones, Tuten, and this entire Hokies team. They really didn't live up to the billing. 6-7, losing the Duke Mayo's Bowl to Minnesota this year. Still, the 2024 All-ACC second-team running back really did live up to the billing of his part, running for over 1,150 yards, 15 touchdowns on 183 carries, boosted his yards per carry from 5 flat to 6.3. Debro, Tuten is another interesting guy who transferred from Va-Tech after going to 2 years of JUCO, also a great punt and kick returner. What are you seeing from him on tape, and what are you hoping to learn more from him at the Combine?
I mean, I like the kid. I think that, again, we're talking about these guys in a deep class. He needs to go here and make some noise. And I think he did that to an extent in Mobile. He needs to add on top of that. For a player that you talked about all the highlights for last year, Seth, also amongst all collegiate running backs with at least 100 carries, this guy was also top 10 in yards after contact per attempt, breakaway run rate, and elusive rating. So you add all of that onto and on top of, he's got the size. He's 5'11", above 200, 210-ish. And he's super athletic, dude. So he needs to go show out this week. Like, he's supposedly been previously clocked like with a sub 4.40 at 23.1 miles per hour, squatting 550 pounds.
Wow.
And really go check the boxes, dude. Not only check the boxes, but check the boxes emphatically. Like, go test really, really well and put yourself, again, much like Yarns, in same kind of conversation. In a deep class, step up. Step up to the front of that tier. Step up to the front of the line, so where a team is saying, okay, we like a lot of guys in this tier. We got a few day 3 picks.
Sure.
Who are we going to sit here and prioritize if we're on the clock? We need a running back, and who's left there? I want him to cement himself at being at the top of that list, where he's in a tier of maybe 2 or 3 guys of a team saying, we're on the clock. Boom. He's left. Come on. Let's call the name.
Do you think he's maybe a long shot to run the fastest 40 at the running back position? Maybe an Isaac Guerrero 16-1 types it? I hit him last year. Is this?
Look, I wouldn't hate if anybody threw some cash out on that. Am I projecting him to run like a 4.3? Probably not. But I won't besmirch anybody taking some long odds on some of these running backs. Especially when we're talking about miles per hour and things like that and correlating to other testing and stuff. I'm not going to sit here and besmirch anybody taking like a 16-1 in that realm.
Sure. Well, I'm excited for those odds to drop. We'll round out the program with Debro's number 1 prospect with something to prove at the NFL Combine. It's Texas tight end Gunnar Helm, the John Mackey Award semifinalist in 2024, led the Longhorns in receptions with 60, also added nearly 800 yards receiving, and found pay dirt 7 times. This was his first season as a starter at Texas after Jadavion Sanders left for the NFL last season. I haven't heard a lot of buzz about Helm lately. Do you think that maybe changes coming out of Indy, Debro?
I hope it does, man. Gunnar Helm, and we talked about a little bit of this as far as the Senior Bowl stuff. I was really disappointed about him opting out. I understand it. I get all the reasons. But my thing with Gunnar Helm, again, we've talked about a deep running back class. It's a deep tight end class, dude.
Sure.
Like, right now, if you're looking at where his consensus he sits at, Gunnar Helm is sitting right now as the consensus tight end. I got to go down the list here. Tight end 6.
Wow.
So I think for Gunnar Helm, I really love his talent. I love the things that he was able to put up on film. If Gunnar Helm goes out there and he tests extremely well and he looks fluid, he looks explosive in the receiving drills in Indy, we're talking about a guy that I think can put himself in the same conversation as, I don't think he's going to rise high enough to jump like a Tyler Warren or a Loveland or anything like that. Can he show enough in Indy to put himself into that tight end 3 conversation, probably with Elijah Arroyo right now, considering he had a monster week at Mobile? Can Helm build enough steam to put himself into that conversation where a team is looking at a tight end in round 2, round 3 of the NFL draft? I mean, dude, he's got enough things on tape to where I think he can, because we're talking about a player that last year was 6th in missed tackles forced. He was 3rd in yak. You turn on the tape and he's got enough speed to separate down the seam, to stretch defenses vertically, and create after the catch. So we need to see the testing. And like, I think there's a possibility. Like, I think Helm has 4.6 speed. If he goes out there and runs a freaking high 4.5, dude, and blows it up in like the other testing metrics, like the vert and things like that, or the short area and stuff, we could be talking about a guy that could be in that same conversation for tight end 3, and I really want to see it for Helm.
There are always surprises at the tight end position in the draft. Being a Penn State fan, I can recall just last year, Theo Johnson has one of the craziest performances we've ever seen at the Combine, boost his stock into day 2 of the draft. And the year before, like Brenton Strange, another tight end coming out of Happy Valley as well, who sneaks into day 2, has had his moments with the Jaguars over the last couple of years, but I'm always interested to see what tight end can kind of, rise above the fold a little bit here, especially as you mentioned, a very, very deep tight end class. So good luck to you, Gunnar Helm. That's going to do it for us today on the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back next week with our running backs preview episode. Again, please like this video if you enjoyed it. Also subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and the podcast feed. For Derek Brown, I'm Seth Woolcock. Take care, y'all.